Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning and a happy Tuesday, gentlemen.
That it is. Jumping back into our Tuesdays. Just a real quick notice here. We are doing a couple pre-recorded episodes. We had some people traveling this week, so can't do a full long episode. So these are pre-recorded, just FYI, for those who are jumping in on live sessions. That being said, though, we're going to jump right into our main topic today. We're going to do a little bit of a shorter episode here. We're going to pull right something from our mailbag. Tommy, you want to kick us into a mailbag here of what we're going to talk about?
I would love to, but we have our default mailbag speaker here.
Well, just give us a topic. Seth will read it.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk about knowing the data versus knowing data. And we're knowing and really kind of going into, you might know a lot of data, you might know all the things in Power BI, but what about an organization's data? What does it actually mean from building your own career?
Okay. Seth, want to give us a readout here? I'm not sure there's really not a lot to read on this one. This is a very short one.
And unlike other mailbags, I think Tommy's summary and description will encompass more detail than the question itself. But that's okay. Probably why he could hesitated for a moment. The question presented by no one is, to what extent does knowing data matter versus knowing the data in an organization when building a career in data?
So I'm not sure how to interpret this question a little bit. I'd be curious, Seth or Tommy, how would you want to interpret this question? What is the difference between knowing data versus knowing the organizational's data? Maybe that's what I'm looking for a distinction here.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead. From my perspective, it's a different way of saying, what is the difference between being a subject matter expert in a business area versus a BI developer?
Okay.
And that's the same way I would put it too, especially when we're talking about, a lot of times we may know a lot of where the tables are. Maybe we know a lot of the, the base metrics, but I think it's that kind of pressure point and what's important to a organization or a team. Like, hey, I know what quota is. I know what members are, but I may not know how much that matters to certain teams. And also if it goes up and goes down by how much that can actually influence the behavior and the mood or the kind of the culture of a team.
I'm interested. Yeah, this is an interesting question. I mean, you said subject matter expert, and are you comparing like a subject matter expert and the data analyst? Like, what would be just a general analyst?
Same. I would consider somebody who's a data analyst in a business area to eventually be a subject matter expert if they obviously don't start off that way, right? But you're pouring through data to understand a lot of the nuance of how things work, decisions that are made, what you need to do, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the nuance of this question lies in, it looks like somebody asking like, when you're building your career, what is more pertinent? And my mind goes instantly somewhere else, because based purely on, I think, a lot of our conversations, the center of excellence, data literacy, data culture, directly impact one side of this question,
yes,
versus the other, which is just innate. A lot of not or earned. You learn things about the business, and the more you learn, the smarter you are about in making better decisions. But how you really scale up in your career, I think, is directly impacted by the other.
I guess I like your kind of take on this a bit more. If we're talking about this in the career space of your data career, right? So how do you leverage the data? Do you just know about data, or do you know data from the organization? How do you use that to scale your career? I guess maybe where I'm reading the line in between the lines here a bit is, I'm interpreting this as, if you can listen to what people are asking for and help them formulate the questions they need to answer to be actionable, that sounds to me like what you'd want to be doing here, right? So I know information about my company. I am trying to figure out what are the next steps. What do we need to do? What do I look at for a report? How do I walk away from that report and then take action on things? I was just talking with a company recently, and that was one of their main goals was we know we can build a lot of reports, but we want them to be important. We want someone to look at them and walk away and do something after that. And I think maybe that's where I'm leaning a bit more of like the difference between knowing data and knowing the data of your organization. Do you understand which questions to directly ask? That will help you build the report in a way that you look at it, you see numbers are down, you leave and you go do something. You go talk to a team, you go talk to the salesperson. More recently, I've had a number of people just kind of reach out, like family members and other people that are near me. They're like, hey, we're actually using Power BI and we're doing this kind of stuff. And they want to show me like their reports and things that they're working on. I'm like, yeah, that's, they're like, well, we want to look at the high level numbers. Let's compare month over month. I'm like, yeah, that's what we should be doing, right? You should be able to walk away from that report and say, I need to do 2 things. What are those 2 things? So
yeah,
go ahead.
This is what I love what you're saying here too, because it's that domain specific knowledge where I think a lot of people struggle with. And I think it's one of those things that I don't think they realize that they do struggle with in terms of being able to relate to a team on what they want, because it's very easy to build a report when they say, I want to see sales, or I want to see leads or conversions. And I want to see it by month. And most people, if with the technical knowledge, can do that pretty straightforwardly. But the problem is those reports, I'm not saying they're not insightful, but is that really those pressure points or the decision-making parts of a team? If you build it, I think exactly how people say, I don't think that becomes very impactful for teams. Having that domain-specific knowledge, I think requires though too, like, well, what are you trying to do with that? And knowing, even sometimes without asking the questions, like, what that team does with X metric or Y metric, why that's important to them. I think I've talked about it on this podcast before, but one of my kind of coolest instances of this was a giant call center, and they were like, we just want to see all these 18 or 35 metrics, and we want to see them in a table by day, by agent. It was like, okay, I can find that. I can get that for you. We can build those metrics. But thinking about what that would look like, well, what are you actually doing with that? And actually realizing that the whole idea of what they're trying to do, even though that would have the data in it in that page, it'd be very hard to decipher what they're actually trying to get out of that. That they actually want to see what teams are available and, who should they contact when something's going wrong. It's like, okay, that's very different from what you asked for. So yeah, I may know where the data is and create those metrics, but it's trying to also know, like, well, what are you trying to do with that? This person who's talking to me, this department, what are they going to be doing with it?
One of the part of this question that I want to kind of emphasis on here, and I think I resonate with your point, Tommy, but I want to kind of expand this a bit maybe, is what do we do when we're talking about the career of your data, or you're expanding your career into the space of data? What should you be focusing on? And my question in my mind is, where do I go find this knowledge, right? If we're talking about these things of how do I ask these questions? How do I ask impactful things? Where do you discover this? I'm kind of curious. Have you read any books recently? Are there some things that you guys have kind of like impacted you to help you focus a bit more on this actionable based reporting for data? And I think that would be the difference between just knowing data and knowing the data of your organization.
I think we're plagued with the experience, right? Like we've learned through the career experiences, and
I agree.
And that's where we land. I think the conversation where you guys have had is a like kind of step 2 in my mind, as far as like driving into better insights, actions coming out of reports, etc. Because fundamentally, what I find is people just don't. When I say they don't understand how to use data, it's specifically focused or pointed at, I think, more of the the basic data engineering, right? Even sometimes, like, what is a table? What is a table of information? How is that constructed, right? What does that mean to like manipulate this table of data, right? How do I join it to other things? And that could be like, in my mind, I think of SQL, right? I'm using a language of T-SQL to join tables together, that I can manipulate the data to have different outputs with other data in different ways. But you can do that in Excel. You can do that in other tools. So how do I combine data together and manipulate it and shape it? And to me, those fundamentals of just understanding what the capabilities of tool sets are around tables of information to produce results that I need kind of opens the door to the conversation of, or I should say, adds the constructs needed to get to the second place of like, I need this report and I need it to show me this stuff, or we need actions that come out of this, but people have no idea how to get there. And I think that's where this question leads in, is like knowing data versus, knowing the data. It's much more important to understand the structures of how to manipulate data sets. And that's why Power BI is a great fundamental tool with a visual interface for you to do that using Power Query, right? And where we talk a lot is more in the advanced spaces or places that you upgrade to enterprise or whatever. There's a million different ways, but ultimately, I think that's where you start, is just, do I know what a data source is, right? Like, how do I connect to something and get access to information and recognize that these objects that we typically reference as tables are interconnected typically, and how do they connect together, and what should I expect to produce when I join these things together in some way, and how do I manipulate the data to remove things, like adding filters, by modifying an output, by standardizing values, and why am I doing all this stuff? Because the end goal is, well, I want 4 clean buckets for the organization values. And why am I doing all this stuff? Because the end goal is, well, I want 4 clean buckets for the organization, and I want to put the dollar amounts in those 4 buckets, but I have 20 in my data set. Mm-hmm. How do I get to the 4? Mm-hmm. Right? And I think those are all the pieces that business intelligence teams and COEs and center, like all of this stuff, brings to the table, is those technical pieces of understanding to the lay business user. So understanding the business is extremely important. Where you get these, I think, fantastic synergies in organizations is where those teams are working together to just inherently cross collaborate all the time and build more value to each other in the organization, because it is purely this question. It's people who know the data, the nuance of the data, and the people that know how to manipulate that or build that data model behind the scenes, which is, I'm taking everything you're saying and this is code to me, right? It's your business like, are you, business user, thinking about your knowledge in the aspects of, hey, we stored that table here. That what you're saying is we need this filter, and then we're going to join it into this table, and then we're going to have this filter and this filter. Like, even if you can bring them closer to that kind of thought process, I think that's what we say, knowing the data, right, matters, right? Because we're bringing the technology aspect of all of this stuff to create things that scale versus somebody just spewing what they know about the business. And I think that's the really impactful part that business intelligence brings to companies, is that scaling of people, because without that, they're just stuck in this room where they know tons about the business, but they're inept at being able to take it further into the tools to help themselves and the organization.
Interesting. When you were talking, I kind of had maybe another moment here, or another thought around this was, you said something about Excel. You can do all your analysis inside Excel, which I've seen a lot of companies just do that. That's the skill. I think that's maybe one of the skill of the business that they learn first or have access to. It may not be the thing you desire to learn. It's just kind of the tool that you are given and you have free reign to build whatever you want inside Excel. But that being said, one of the things I'm kind of hanging my hat on here, I think a little bit, is the automation level. Seth, you had kind of mentioned, like, do it in Excel, fine, interesting, okay. Well, you want to be able to repeat that output over and over again. Like, Excel is not easily automatable, or it's not easily automatable in a way that you can give to other people. So I think, if I'm talking about just the difference between knowing the data and being able to be impactful for the organization, right? You're answering those questions. You're working with the business. You're understanding what data they need. You're figuring out there's a raw form of data. It's in the transactional layer, and you need to get it into a reporting layer. You need to aggregate things, build stuff. You're basically making it mental. In my mind, as you were speaking, I'm thinking there's individuals making a mental data model, and you have to take that mental data model and push it into automation. I'm going to run this pipeline. I'm going to pick up this table from here. I'm going to transform it. I'm going to put it there, and then it's going to have the columns and data transforms that I need to build the next thing. So it's kind of more of that mindset of like listening to what people want and figuring out how to automate, build a data pipeline to get from one place to what the people need. Right? If that's simplifying things a little bit too much.
No, I think that directly describes the outcome that we want.
Yes.
Right. Is somebody who in the business who is thinking in terms of the structures of where the data comes from.
Yes.
Because that's how they're going to be able to answer the question or drive something further for somebody in building a report, because they're thinking in those technical terms of data.
Yes.
Like it's the manipulation of whatever I'm presented with. And that's where I think Power BI is so powerful, because it opens that door, and even more so now Fabric, but to a much larger and more complicated scale to people.
Yes.
Is that it offers all of business users the different components that you would need to understand what we mean by, are you data literate? Like, can you work with data? And if you invested time into the Power Query parts of that, right, to really understand like all the nuance, like you can join tables in there, you can manipulate, you can add columns. It's set based, but also you can replace values, you can combine things, you can bucket things. Anything from an ETL perspective, if you understood what you were doing in there, right, connected to multiple different sources, like automated that process, you're so far ahead of the game, because you're thinking about, okay, well, where is that data going to come from? How am I going to go do this thing? And that is, I think, paramount for people to make that jump from just being presented data to analyze, or being a subject matter expert of a business area, and understand the concepts of data and data shaping and modeling to be able to leverage it. And then there's the whole second part of that where, okay, I've shaped all this. Like now I have extended capability, right? Now I can further build relationships and data models. And oh, wait, right? What is this? What do you mean I have to reshape my data? What do you mean like I should have it in facts dimensions? Why would I want to do that? And it's like, holy cow, wait, you're telling me I can create like 4 different measures and have my sum of sales last year, like this year, like all just with calculations? Mind blown, right? And that's where I think people hit this point where they've been working with what they've been given for so long, and then they hit an aha moment. And for me, typically in the past, it's been where all of a sudden you did something that they were along this track, like, great, we're building this, I'm going to get this data set, it's going to be awesome. And then they go, wait a minute, you just did something with the same data set that would have taken me another 2 weeks to build. And you did it in one calculation.
Yeah.
Right? Like, or I can compare these different time periods against each other. Right? Like that's a common one. But it's like, those are the things where, like you win people over, but ultimately bringing that side of data modeling, manipulation, just working with data is what I think programs within organizations can do, because then data becomes powerful for everybody and not just the few people who have had the experiences and learned from the technical spaces.
I think we're stepping into a new land here where a lot of what you were saying there spoke to me like you're talking to a business user or business. You're coming from the business user centric into more of a IT shop. However, if I think about what's going on here in particularly this question, it sounds to me like this is a business user question. And what I think Microsoft is doing right now is what they're doing with their tooling is they're blurring the line very deeply between business analyst and like data engineer and other tools you can get your hands on, right? So Power Query was the first tool that really blended that world very cleanly, right? Or it blended the world very deeply, right? A business user could write something in Power Query. I could hand it to someone in the IT shop, and they would know exactly step by step, how did I transform the data, right? Here's exactly what I need to do to shape this data from this raw form into something that I can send on to my boss and make tables of data that are useful. That was huge. And I think I'm still leaning on that, but now it's not just Power Query, it's a pipeline, it's a notebook, it's all these other tools that we now have at our disposal. And Microsoft is throwing everything that's data platform-esque. And now with the addition of SQL Server inside Fabric, we're now bringing the transactional systems directly into Fabric as well. So we're adding another persona here of the operational system directly inside Fabric. So I don't know how to say this right, but I feel like what we're talking about right now in this question is business user centric. However, Fabric is more of this tool that has many different profiles of users. And I think if you want to make yourself extremely valuable to the business, if you're starting from the business user level, work your way into these other more technical roles, data engineer, data science, app developer. Like if that interests you, you have bandwidth to go that direction. Now that you may not take it all the way in there, you may not go all the way into the depths of that area, but if that interests you, if you're looking to grow your data career, man, the best data engineers I've had have been software developers. Pure and simple. Like they understand automation, they understand how to move things, they understand data structures. There's so much fundamentals of app developers that understand how to move around with data. I give them almost little to no direction, and they know exactly what to build. Like it's incredible.
I don't know. I love the points, but to the extent that it matters from the career point of view, if I'm going in an organization, and again, whether I'm FTE or whether I'm a consultant who's always going to be working with new organizations, new data sets.
Sure.
The automation sure is important. Those roles from the data engineering sure important, but there's also a skill here too on my ability either to fast track or fast learn on a new organization's data, or be very intimate with going through each department's data, right? Because I can automate everything. It's amazing I can have those technical skills. But if I'm having trouble, if I'm just going to rinse and repeat, they ask for this, I'll build that in the metrics, and they're like, wow. But I think there's another step here on that, the literacy part of an organization, and really kind of diving into those, we'll call them, I don't want to say the soft side of things, but more again around that idea of pressure points, or really measuring what matters to them. Again, they may say sales, they may say member counts, but probably it's over some more obscure context of, well, I'm trying to see this over 2 weeks, or, what I'm really trying to do with this is X, Y, and Z. And I think that's a really strong skill to have here, because if I'm just the data engineer, I'm
not saying it's not, but you can't get there without understanding how to build it.
And that's a good point. I'm putting this to how the mailbag was actually phrased here. I don't think he was saying does one matter more than the other, but he's actually kind of saying that, like, how much does actually doing the technical skills right impact versus that knowledge domain?
I think I would argue here a little bit. I mean, what you're saying, Tommy, I think I resonate with. Seth, I think I understand your point here on the technical, like, you got to know how to do this. I'm going through here and I'm thinking, like, how do you get your knowledge around this one? This is not rocket science. I would say no matter what department you're in, you're saying, Tommy, like, questions like, hey, do you want this data? I find that when I walk between many different organizations, even though they're different industries, financial, energy, healthcare, they're all asking the same kinds of questions. So if you just study, like I'm looking right now at the Kimball Group. The Kimball Group has this dimensional modeling techniques page, and I'll put that in the description of this chat as well. But it's really well done, and it talks about things like gathering your business requirements. What kind of grain of data do you have? What dimensions do you need? What is a star schema?
Right.
What does an OLAP look like?
But instantly, right? What is a dimension? What is a fact? What
exactly.
is it like? And if you don't have those basic constructs,
exactly,
and that's what I'm saying, that's where it starts.
Yeah, I would say yes, you're going to cater some of these questions specifically to what one business unit or the other. But I think the more you do this, the more you're going to find the questions are all the same. They're very similar in nature. What's my performance now? How do I compare that performance to something else? And that should be really our main driver. We should be talking about, what are we measuring right now that's important to us? What keeps you up at night? What drives your value to the company? Then what do you compare that to? Do you have a goal? Is it a budget? Is it last year's number? Is it last month's number? I don't know. But all those things, it's that stuff every single time. And you're either saying, I want to be a higher number than I was last time, the same number, or lower. You can boil it down to that simple question, let people discuss. And then now once you know what they're looking for, like in the energy sector, we want to bring energy usage down, or we want to optimize things. Great. Let's look at something over time. What does it look like this month? What was it last month? Same period last year. Like we're bringing the numbers lower, as opposed to like sales. You want numbers to go up. So what are we doing to make the numbers go up? Like, to me, it's like very straightforward, like what we're trying to look for.
Yeah, I think this is the difference between being the doer and the receiver, right? And what didn't strike me until a few moments ago was the largest difference between knowing, like, being the subject matter of expert of data versus knowing how to work with the data is you'll hit a threshold where you can't fix anything with like your analysis. Like, you can't get to the answer that you need to, and you're going and searching for that answer requires other people. It requires access or data manipulation or something.
You are very right on this.
And then all of a sudden, where does it go? It goes to the BI team, right? Because they don't need to know everything. They just know how to get it for you.
Yep.
What's ironic about this that just struck me is this was me.
Oh, interesting.
I was the subject matter expert in the business, and I hit the threshold of the application I was working in could only go so far, but I knew we had databases. I just didn't know how to access them. And I had some really cool folks that were like, hey, if you're actually interested, we'll teach you how to do this stuff. And this is where I think this is where users who, if you're the subject matter expert, these tools and technologies are closer to your understanding than you think. And the reason I say that is because the time and effort you put into the functions, the thing you have to do, like to manipulate the data, the join, the whatever, right? Those you can grasp, but because you're a subject matter expert, you know the data, right? So you understand whether or not the outputs you start creating are valid. And that is significant in building something that a lot of business intelligence developers who don't have that context, at least, are at a disadvantage because they can't validate the results. They need the subject matter experts to do that, but it's more just the Q&A. It's the analysis. Yeah. If you bring both of those things to the table, now you're super valuable, because as you're learning, you can tell whether or not the data is accurate, and you're self-correcting, right? So you're learning faster than others, and you're already validating that the outputs are what you would expect. So everything you learn is a value to yourself, because you're learning new skills that allow you to shape and do these things on your own without the need of technical teams that are showing you how to do that. And I think that's the biggest value behind business intelligence and these efforts to disseminate this information to people, because even if you grab 10 other people in the org that never knew what working with data was, this is how you level people up. And all of a sudden, a lot more people are serving their own needs, etc. But I think this is what also points out, is it important to be a subject matter expert? Yeah, absolutely. Knowing your business, being able to speak to it, make decisions and articulate things.
Yeah.
But there's a threshold there that you're not going to be able to cross. And building these skill sets in whatever tooling, in whatever method, is paramount to solving not just your own next level questions, but the questions of your business unit, or on a wider scale, the organization.
I like that you went that route. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think your comment around when you know the data, the knowledge you need to get to use other tools isn't as far away as you think. I think, and I think now with Fabric, again, not necessarily talking about Power BI, but like talking Fabric, that's exactly my point. I bring that point a lot to users and say, you already know how to shape data. You already know how to do data engineering. You're already doing it in Excel with VLOOKUPs and multiple tables. And like you're building little mini databases inside Excel, but something that's smaller and you can manage and you can see all the data in table form. You're doing the same thing. We're just doing it at scale with more data that you can't see physically in a table. You have to like write queries against them. I love that point, Seth. And I think that's really the point, what we want to talk about here. If you're talking about a career of data, take what you know as a business user, go learn SQL, go learn Python, go learn how to automate, and take those common questions you've always been asking. What are we comparing? What's the time period? What is a measure of success or not? And build things around that space. I think that'll definitely catapult your career further down that data space. Cool. Well, actually, this is a good stopping point for us. We need to keep this one short because we have to record some more stuff as well. So for that being said, this is going to be a short episode. I will put the link in the description here for the Kimball Group. Really some good information here about, talking about grain of data, facts and measurements, dimensions, star schema, really good information, solid information that I think that business user should know in order to move into that data career further. That being said, we just really appreciate your time. Thank you for listening with us today. Hope this question was something that maybe is either on your heart or you thought about it or you're thinking about these things as well. Hopefully some of this gives you some food for thought, pushing you maybe further towards that data engineering level, or if you're a data engineer, maybe pulling some things out of this and looking and thinking about a business analyst level as well, or what you can incorporate there as well. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a question, idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tips/podcast, leave your name and a great question, and join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. We'll let you go early today. Here's an extra 30 minutes back to your day. Have a great day. See ya. Bye.